I never planned to fall for my neighbor. But the night I crawled under her basement sink with a flashlight in my teeth and a wrench in my hand, something shifted that I still have not figured out how to explain. My name is Jake. I am 26 years old, and I live in a small rented house on Clover Street in Austin, Texas. The place has scuffed hardwood floors, a porch light that flickers when the wind picks up, and a backyard that sits right up against my neighbor's fence. I work as a freelance contractor. When something breaks and someone does not want to wait 3 days for a professional, they call me. Pays the bills, and it lets me set my own hours. Most days it is just me, my toolbox, and a quiet that used to feel like enough. I had lived on that street for almost 2 years before I ever had a real conversation with the woman next door. Her name was Cora. I knew that much from the one time a package got delivered to my porch by mistake. She was somewhere in her early 40s, kept her yard clean, waved when she saw me, and mostly kept to herself. She had a grown son named Brett who visited on weekends sometimes. I had talked to him a few times over the fence. Good guy, easy to like, the kind of person who shakes your hand and means it. I never thought much about Cora beyond that. She was my neighbor. That was the whole story, until a Thursday evening in November changed it. I was sitting on my couch with a half-eaten sandwich and a game on the TV when I heard a knock at my front door. Not a hard knock. A careful one, like whoever was on the other side was not sure they should be there. I opened the door and there she was, Cora, standing on my porch in a gray cardigan, her auburn hair falling loose around her shoulders. Her face caught somewhere between embarrassed and worried. There was a small wet stain on the knee of her jeans. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "I think something is wrong in my basement. Water is coming from somewhere and I cannot figure out where." I did not know who else to call at this hour. I looked at the wet patch on her jeans. "How long has it been leaking?" I asked. She let out a short breath. "Long enough that my shoes are wet," she said. I grabbed my bag off the hook by the door without even thinking about it. Her basement smelled like damp concrete and old wood. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting that weak yellow light that does not quite reach the corners. She held a flashlight while I crouched down behind the water heater and found the problem fast. A joint on the cold water line had cracked. Not a disaster, but not nothing either. Water was moving slow and steady across the floor toward a floor drain. Another hour and it would have started climbing the walls of the storage boxes stacked nearby. "I will need to shut off your main," I said, already moving toward the valve on the wall. She handed me a wrench before I even asked for one. I looked up at her. She shrugged one shoulder. "I watched a YouTube video after I called you," she said. "Figured that was probably the next step." I laughed. Came out before I could stop it. She smiled at that, just barely, like she was not sure she was allowed to yet. Took about 40 minutes. She stayed the whole time, handing me things, holding the light steady, not asking unnecessary questions. Most people pace or disappear into the kitchen when something is being fixed in their house. She did not. She just stayed, and she paid attention. When I finally stood up and turned the water back on, we both held our breath while I checked the joint. Nothing dripped. She let out a long, slow breath that I felt more than heard. "Thank you," she said. "Really." I did not know who else to ask. "It is fine," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "That is what neighbors are for." She nodded, but something in her face looked like she was not used to people showing up. Like my being there, just showing up with a bag and no complaint, was something she had not expected. I started packing up my tools. She stood near the stairs with her arms crossed loosely, not in a cold way, more like she was holding something in. "Can I get you something?" she asked. "Water or coffee?" "It is late, but I have decaf." "I should get back," I said. She nodded again. "Of course." I picked up my bag. She turned toward the stairs. And then, just before she took the first step up, she stopped. She did not turn all the way around. She just looked back over her shoulder. And in that low yellow light, her voice came out quieter than before. "You came just for me?" she said. It was not exactly a question, but it was not exactly a statement either. It landed somewhere in between, in that small strange space where words mean more than they should. I did not answer right away. I stood there holding my bag in the dim basement while the water heater clicked and the pipes settled. The words were simple, But the way she said them was not. I came because you knocked, I said finally. And because you looked like you needed someone. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, thank you. Sorry. It has been a long week. She went upstairs. I followed. At the front door, she handed me a $20 bill for parts and I told her to keep it. She tried again. I shook my head. At least let me cook you dinner sometime, she said. As a real thank you. You do not have to do that, I said. I know, she said. That is not why I am offering. I walked back across the yard in the dark, the fence gate clicking shut behind me. Inside my house, I set my bag down and stood in the kitchen for a minute without turning on a light. The quiet felt different than it had an hour ago. I could not tell you exactly why. I just know that I sat back down on my couch and the game on the TV no longer had my attention. I kept thinking about that pause on the stairs. You came just for me. I had driven past her house 100 times, waved from the driveway, seen her carrying groceries alone on a Sunday afternoon. And somehow, until that moment in the basement with a cracked pipe and a weak yellow bulb overhead, I had never once actually looked at her. That night I looked. 3 days went by. I told myself I was busy. I had 2 jobs lined up across town. A bathroom retile in the morning and a deck repair in the afternoon. I kept my head down. I ate lunch in my truck. I came home tired and went to bed without thinking too hard about anything. Then her name appeared on my phone on a Sunday morning. Hey, it is Cora from next door. The back porch light is making a buzzing sound. Is that something I should worry about or am I just being paranoid? I stared at the message for a second. Then I typed back. Probably a loose wire in the fixture. Easy fix. Give me 20 minutes. She sent back a single word. Really? I pulled on my jacket and grabbed my bag. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, like she had expected me to text back a YouTube link instead of actually show up. She was in a loose cream sweater, her auburn hair falling around her shoulders, a coffee mug in her hand that she was clearly on her second or third of. You did not have to come in person, she said. Easier than explaining it over text, I said. Where is the switch? She stepped back and let me in. The buzzing was exactly what I thought. The fixture had a loose neutral wire that had been vibrating against the casing every time the light was on. 2 minutes with a screwdriver and it was done. I clicked the light on and off twice. Silence both times. See, I said. Nothing to worry about. She was leaning in the doorway watching me come back inside, still holding her mug. Do you want coffee? She asked. It is the least I can do. I had already had 1 cup at home. I said yes anyway. Her kitchen was warm in a quiet way that I noticed immediately. Not decorated in any fancy sense. Just lived in. A stack of books on the counter next to a small wooden fruit bowl. A notepad covered in handwriting near the phone. A candle burned down halfway on the windowsill above the sink. The kind of room that belongs to someone who actually uses it. She poured me a mug and we stood on opposite sides of the counter for a moment without saying much. Outside the window, the yard was gray and still. I am editing a manuscript right now, she said. A memoir. Guy who spent 3 years building a cabin alone in the mountains. Fascinating, but he cannot write a sentence shorter than 40 words. I laughed at that. She smiled into her mug. She told me she had been freelance editing for about 6 years. Before that, she had worked at a small publishing house but left after the divorce. Starting over at 38, she said, is not something anyone prepares you for. You just wake up one day and the whole map is gone and you have to draw a new one from scratch. That sounds exhausting, I said. It was, she said. But I got pretty good at reading maps after a while. There was a beat of quiet between us that did not feel uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of quiet that 2 people only get to after they have already said something real. I asked her about Brett. She lit up a little when she talked about him. Said he was doing well, working in property management 2 towns over, came home most weekends when he could. She was proud of him in a way that was obvious without being loud about it. He is a good kid, she said. He worries about me more than he should. You seem pretty capable of handling things, I said. She looked at me over the rim of her mug. I am tired of being capable, she said. It is not the same thing as being okay. I did not have a quick answer for that. She did not seem to need one. She just set her mug down and looked out the window for a moment like she had forgotten I was there. Then she seemed to remember and looked back. Sorry, she said. That came out heavier than I meant it to. No, I said. I get it. She tilted her head slightly, like she was deciding whether or not to believe me. What about you, she asked. Do you have people around? Friends, family close by? I thought about it honestly. My parents were up in Amarillo. I had a couple of friends from my trade school days who I texted more than I saw. A girl I had dated for almost 2 years who told me before she left that I was always present but never really there. I have people, I said. Just not always close. She nodded slowly. Yeah, she said. I know that feeling. I left about an hour after I had planned to. At the door she thanked me again and I told her it was nothing. She shook her head slightly like she disagreed but was not going to argue about it. Over the next 2 weeks I found reasons to come back. I noticed a rotted board on her back fence from my own yard and knocked one afternoon with a spare plank and a drill. She brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and sat on the steps watching while I worked. We talked about nothing important. Music she had been listening to, podcast I had started, whether the taco place on 5th Street was worth the line on a Friday night. Then one evening she knocked on my door holding a pot of chili and a look on her face like she was daring herself to go through with it. I made too much, she said, and you fixed my fence without being asked. So, I opened the door wider without a word. We ate at her kitchen table with the back door cracked open, letting in the cool November air. A record played from the small turntable on her bookshelf. The chili was the best thing I had eaten in weeks and I told her so. She looked genuinely pleased, like she had almost forgotten what it felt like to cook for someone and have them notice. She told me more about the memoir she was editing. I told her about a job that had gone wrong when a client changed their mind about a load-bearing wall mid-project. She covered her mouth when she laughed. I noticed a lot of things I probably should not have. When the record ended and the room got quiet, she looked at me across the table. Can I ask you something, she said. Sure, I said. She turned her mug in her hands once. Why do you keep coming back, she asked. And I mean that honestly, not as a complaint. I looked at her for a moment. Her eyes were steady, patient, not pushing. Because every time I leave, I said slowly, I find myself thinking about the next reason to come back. She held my gaze for a few seconds without speaking. Something moved across her face that I could not fully name. Then she looked down at her mug and said quietly, Brett is coming home this weekend. I nodded. Okay, I said. She looked back up. He has been asking about the neighbor who keeps fixing things, she said. I did not know what to tell him. What did you say, I asked. She paused. I said you were a good person, she said, and that you had good timing. Her eyes stayed on mine just long enough that I felt it in my chest. Then she stood and started clearing the table, and just like that the moment folded itself up and slipped away. But it had been there. We both knew it had been there. I walked home across the dark yard that night with the smell of chili still on my jacket and a thought turning slow circles in my head. Brett was coming home this weekend. And whatever. This was quiet and unspoken and growing in the small space between her kitchen and my front door, was about to have a name attached to it whether either of us was ready or not. Brett knew something was going on before I ever said a word. I could tell by the way he looked at me when he pulled up that Saturday morning. I had not planned to go over there. I was in my driveway loading tools into my truck for a job across town when Brett's pickup turned onto the street. He spotted me before I spotted him. He honked once, short and friendly, and waved out the window like it was the most normal thing in the world. I waved back. He parked, got out, and walked straight over with his hands in his jacket pockets and that easy smile he always had. Hey man, he said. You working today? Got a job out on Ridgeline, I said. Deck replacement. Should take most of the day. He nodded, looking at my truck for a second. Then he looked at me. Mom said you fixed the fence last week, he said. And the porch light before that. And the pipe back in November. He was not accusing me of anything. His voice was steady and warm. But he was listing things. And when someone lists things like that, slowly, one after the other, they are not just making conversation. Yeah, I said. Stuff came up. It was not a big deal. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she seems different lately. Good different. I just noticed. I did not know what to do with that, so I just nodded and said I was glad she was doing okay. He looked at me for one more second. Then he smiled again and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Come by later if you finish early," he said. "She is making chicken soup and she always makes too much." He walked back across the street and I stood next to my truck for a moment after he disappeared inside. The air was cool and smelled like cut grass from somewhere down the block. I got in the truck, started it, and sat there with both hands on the wheel before I finally pulled out. I thought about that conversation the whole drive to Ridgeline. He noticed. He did not say anything direct, but he noticed. And the fact that he had invited me over instead of pulling me aside meant one of two things. Either he genuinely had no idea what was growing between his mother and me, or he understood more than he was letting on and was choosing to keep the door open anyway. Neither option made me feel steady. I finished the deck job in 5 hours. I drove back to Clover Street telling myself I was just going to go home and eat whatever was in my fridge and leave it alone for one night. I knocked on Cora's door at 6. Brett answered. He grinned like he had been expecting me. "See," he said over his shoulder toward the kitchen. "Told you." Cora appeared in the hallway wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was in a soft green shirt, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, and when she saw me she did that thing where her face tried to stay neutral and did not quite manage it. "There is enough soup," she said. "Sit down." The three of us ate together at the kitchen table. Brett talked about a property he was managing in San Marcos that had more problems than a crossword puzzle. I told him about the deck job and the client who kept changing his mind about the stain color. Cora ate quietly and laughed when something was funny and kept both our bowls full without making a show of it. It looked like nothing, felt like everything. At one point Brett got up to take a call outside. The back door had barely closed when the air in the kitchen shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Cora picked up his empty bowl and carried it to the sink. I stayed at the table. "You really did not have to come," she said quietly, her back to me. "I know," I said. "That stopped being the reason a while ago." She stood at the sink for a moment without moving. Then she set the bowl down and turned around. She leaned back against the counter with her arms loosely crossed, and she looked at me in a way that was different from every other time she had looked at me. It was direct, unguarded, like she had decided to stop pretending she did not see what was happening. "Jake," she said, "Brett likes you. He trusts you." "I know that too," I said. She held my gaze. "And does that worry you?" I thought about the honest answer before I gave it. "It does not scare me off," I said. "But I know what it means. I know what I am asking." She looked at the table, then back at me. "You are not asking anything," she said softly. "That is the part that gets me. You just keep showing up and you never ask for anything, and I do not know what to do with that." Before I could answer, the back door opened and Brett came back in, phone still in his hand, shaking his head about whatever the call had been. The moment closed like a book. We finished the evening playing cards at the table, Brett winning 2 out of 3 rounds and making sure we both knew about it. When he finally said goodnight and headed upstairs, Cora walked me to the front door. The house was quiet behind her and the porch light was steady, not buzzing anymore, because I had fixed it weeks ago. She handed me my jacket from the hook by the door. "He is heading back tomorrow afternoon," she said. I nodded. She looked at the jacket in her hands for a second before giving it to me. "Maybe come by after," she said. "I have leftovers and a question I have been trying to ask you for 2 weeks." "What question?" I said. She met my eyes. "Tomorrow," she said. She closed the door. I walked back across the yard in the dark, the fence gate clicking softly behind me. I went inside and sat in my kitchen without turning on the television. The street outside was still. I did not sleep much that night, not because anything had gone wrong, because everything felt like it was standing just at the edge of something, waiting for one more step. I showed up at 4:30 the next afternoon. Brett's truck was already gone. The street was quiet in the way that Sunday streets get when the weekend is almost over and everyone is settling back into their real lives. I knocked twice and Cora opened the door like she had been close to it already. "Come in," she said. "Soup is still warm." She was in jeans and a soft rust-colored sweater, her hair falling around her shoulders, no pretense about it. The house smelled like the same chicken soup from the night before and something underneath it. Candle wax maybe, or just the particular warmth of a house that someone takes care of. We ate at the counter this time instead of the table. Smaller, less formal, like we had already moved past needing the distance between us to feel safe. When the bowls were empty, she refilled my water and then stood across the counter from me and looked at me directly. "Okay," she said. "Here is the question." I waited. She pressed her palms flat on the counter. "What are you doing, Jake? And I mean really, not the pipes and the fence and the porch light. What are you actually doing here?" The honest answer had been building for weeks. I had turned it over 100 times in my truck, in my driveway, lying awake the night before. I was done being careful with it. "I come because I want to," I said. "Not because something is broken. Not because it gives me a reason. Because being here in this kitchen, talking to you about things that actually matter, feels more real than most of my day." She was quiet. Her jaw was tight. Not angry, just holding something. "I am older than you," she said. "I know. I have a grown son who is your friend. I know that too. People on this street notice everything," she said. "A truck in a driveway 3 times a week does not go unmentioned." "Let them mention it," I said. She let out a short breath that was almost a laugh but did not quite get there. "You make it sound easy," she said. "I did not say it was easy," I said. "I said I wanted it anyway." She looked down at her hands on the counter. Her fingers were still. Then she said something I was not expecting. "Brett asked me about you this morning before he left," she said. "He asked if something was going on." My chest tightened. "What did you tell him?" I asked. She looked up. "I told him the truth," she said. "I told him I did not know yet, but that I thought I wanted there to be." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window the yard was gray and still, a single bird cutting across the sky above the fence line. I came around the counter slowly. She did not move back. She looked up at me when I was close enough that she had to, and I could see every small thing in her face. The tiredness she carried and the warmth underneath it. The worry she had not quite let go of and the something else that had been building since the night in the basement. I put my hand over hers on the counter. She looked down at it. Then she turned her hand over and held mine back. "This is not going to be simple," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "It might get complicated with Brett. With people around here. With everything." "I know all of that," I said. She lifted her eyes to mine. "And you are still standing here." "I am still standing here," I said. For a long moment neither of us moved. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against my shoulder the way you do when you have been holding something heavy for a long time and you finally find somewhere to set it down. I put my arm around her and we just stood there in her kitchen while the light through the window went slowly gold. We did not make it into anything bigger than it was. We did not need to. We just stayed there, quiet. The soup bowls empty behind us. The candle burning low on the windowsill. The house settled and warm around us. Later we moved out to the back porch with 2 mugs of decaf and sat on the steps with our shoulders touching. The yard was dark past the fence, and the air smelled like November leaves and chimney smoke from somewhere down the block. "You know," she said after a while, watching the yard. "If that pipe had not cracked, none of this would have started." "Maybe," I said, "but I think I would have found a reason eventually." She turned to look at me. "A loose board," she said. "A flickering light. A buzzing fixture," I said. "A rotted fence plank." She laughed, low and real, and leaned her head against my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time. No big declarations. No promises we could not keep. Just 2 people on a back porch in November, shoulders touching, mugs going cold, figuring out slowly and honestly what they meant to each other. 3 weeks later Brett came back for the weekend and I was already at the kitchen table when he walked in. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. He set his bag down by the door. "Somebody better have saved me some of that soup," he said. Cora looked at me. I looked at her. "There is plenty," she said. "Sit down." And just like that, without ceremony or explanation, it became something real. Not perfect. Not without its complications. But real in the way that only honest things are, the kind that start small in a basement, with a cracked pipe and a woman standing on a porch in a gray cardigan asking a question she already knew the answer to. "You came just for me." "Yeah, I did. And I was not going anywhere."